What if the secret to never being hurt again isn't building walls? It's tearing them down. Have you spent years trying to become unbreakable? Someone immune to harsh words, abandonment, betrayal, and loss? Maybe you've imagined waking up one day finally free from that quiet suffering, the kind that gnaws at you even when you're smiling on the outside. Perhaps you're exhausted from satisfying everyone's expectations, holding up a facade of constant resilience when deep down you just want one moment, one breath, where you don't have to appear invincible. But here's something nobody's been brave enough to tell you. While you keep dodging discomfort, it maintains its grip on you. While you numb yourself, shield yourself, and retreat into hiding, you stay imprisoned by everything happening around you, by comments that sting, by disappointments that crush, by silences that devour you from within. This isn't about being weak. This is simply how most humans operate. The distinction? Some people just fake it more convincingly. Carl Jung, a pioneer of psychological depth, observed that our identity isn't determined by circumstances. It's forged by our responses to them. That's where your power resides. The goal isn't shielding yourself from reality. It's absorbing it completely. It's not about turning emotionally frozen, detached, or unreachable. It's about wholeness. It's about illuminating everything currently wounding you in darkness. Because genuine power isn't pain's absence. It's complete self-knowledge, even while you're wounded. If you're still watching, that's no accident. This message is crafted for you. Someone drained from being bruised by everything and everyone. For you who constantly feel emotionally defenseless, as though others possess mysterious control over your inner world. I'm going to prove this doesn't have to continue. But understanding this requires confronting certain realities that might initially sting. And perhaps, for once, this discomfort will liberate you. Let's begin. You're convinced that your suffering originates externally, in others' behavior, in careless language, in abandonments you've endured, in betrayals you never anticipated. But here's the harsh reality. None of these events possess inherent power to wound you unless there's already a raw opening inside. What damages you isn't their actions toward you. It's what these encounters awaken internally. It's the narrative you construct around them. It's ancient trauma never properly examined. It's the void you mask with toughness, with ego, with that frantic necessity to appear perfectly balanced. Jung demonstrated that external pain merely mirrors what remains unintegrated in our interior landscape. This explains why certain individuals survive catastrophic events while maintaining composure, while others shatter from a single remark. The difference isn't the event itself, it's where that event strikes inside you. And here's an uncomfortable realization. You continue suffering intensely because somewhere deep down, you believe you can dictate how the world must handle you. You're still attempting to become adequate enough, intelligent enough, resilient enough, compassionate enough, as though perfection guarantees protection from harm. But control is fantasy, and clinging to this fantasy keeps you perpetually tense, attempting to forecast chaos, attempting to prevent the unavoidable. Want to stop hurting? Then stop defending yourself against hurt. What you require isn't tighter control, it's expanded awareness. While you believe others must transform before your suffering ends, you remain chained to their choices. Your liberation starts when you grasp that external forces only have influence if they resonate with something already inside you. Everything that wounds you externally only succeeds because it echoes internally. And this brings us directly to the real battleground, the unconscious mind. What you cannot perceive, cannot comprehend, and cannot govern ends up governing you. And this territory, this is what we'll explore next. Prepare yourself to descend one layer deeper, because transformation's true beginning lives there. If this resonates with you, hit that subscribe button and like. Thank you for being here. The greatest deception you've absorbed is believing you control your existence. Time to wake up, because you don't. At least not while you continue operating on automatic, reacting without understanding, feeling without comprehending origins, making choices you'll later undermine yourself. Carl Jung made this transparent when he declared, "Until you illuminate the unconscious, it commands your life while you label it destiny." And that's your current reality. The ache you experience, the rage erupting unexpectedly, the melancholy invading you without clear cause. None of this is arbitrary. These are signals transmitted from forgotten aspects of yourself, ignored dimensions, suppressed elements. Jung identified this shadowy domain as the unconscious. It's not merely nebulous thinking. It's a dynamic power, an entire architecture of memories, wounds, yearnings, and terrors you refuse confronting. Yet these continue dictating your emotional responses and behavioral choices. You question why particular phrases annihilate you while others remain unaffected, because those phrases strike tender areas within you that remain raw and active. And they're active because you've never genuinely faced them. You've simply swept them beneath your psychological carpet, and now you keep stumbling over that hidden mess. Jung stated, "We cannot alter anything without first accepting it. Judgment doesn't free, it imprisons." And what have you been doing? Criticizing yourself, suppressing yourself, muting yourself, as though silence solves problems. The reality? The unconscious doesn't vanish because you ignore it. It simply discovers more hazardous manifestations. Toxic relationships you endlessly repeat, self-sabotage patterns you cannot shatter, anxieties and dreads that surface precisely when everything appears fine. This isn't misfortune. It's your unconscious attempting to awaken you. But you insist on sleeping. Want to become someone impervious to harm? Then stop fleeing from your interior landscape. Because while you remain ignorant of your unconscious, you're merely a puppet controlled by your emotions. The more you attempt protecting yourself from external suffering, the more susceptible you become to internal torment. But there's an exit, and it's not found in defense, it's discovered through integration. Because becoming unshakable isn't resistance, it's profound self-knowledge. This is what we'll examine next. What does it genuinely mean to be unmoved? And why does this strength emerge not from armor, but from acceptance? Let's continue deeper. Most people assume the only protection from pain is closing themselves off completely. They construct barriers, generate masks, develop emotional shields, and pretend nothing penetrates. They announce, "I don't care anymore. Nothing bothers me. I'm immune to everything." But internally, they continue bleeding. They continue eroding. Because the problem was never about experiencing emotions. The problem is not recognizing what you're experiencing and why. And this only afflicts those who haven't yet discovered themselves. Jung was exact when he proclaimed, "Know every theory, master every technique, but when encountering a human soul, be simply another human soul." And that human soul you keep concealing behind a powerful, invulnerable, controlled persona, it's desperate to be witnessed. Becoming emotionally powerful has zero connection to becoming cold. It has nothing to do with dismissing pain, sidestepping conflict, or pretending indifference. It concerns integration. It concerns acceptance. It concerns bringing everything you've buried into daylight. You don't become untouchable by erecting barriers between yourself and reality. You become untouchable when you recognize that nothing can touch what you've already embraced within yourself. When you integrate your shadows, your terrors, your imperfections, your vulnerabilities, you stop reacting to everything. You observe. You select. You're no longer an emotional marionette. And that constitutes true freedom. Jung labeled this individuation, the journey of becoming your authentic self. Not what others demand of you. Not what you imagined you should become for acceptance. But what emerges naturally from within, from the fusion of light and darkness, between ego and the unconscious realm. Individuation isn't a perfection process. Jung explained, it's an integration process. You don't need to become superior. You simply need to become complete. And here's the secret nobody revealed. The more you escape from pain, the more it pursues you. The more you attempt remaining unaffected, the more brittle you become. But when you confront your own wounds directly, when you accept who you are, including everything beautiful and hideous, noble and shameful, nothing external possesses power to demolish you. However, this journey demands courage. Courage to examine inward. Courage to discard masks. Courage to feel deeply. Because hidden within pain itself lies transformation's key. And that's our next discovery. How suffering, rather than being your adversary, can become the doorway to your genuine strength. Let's dive even deeper. This time, without hesitation. You learn despising pain during childhood. You were taught that suffering signals weakness, that crying wastes time, that feeling intensely makes you fragile. So you started running, avoiding, denying. But the more you flee suffering, the more it hunts you. And worse, it transforms. It camouflages itself as anxiety, anger, numbness, boredom, self-destructive urges you can't even trace to their source. Ignored pain doesn't evaporate. It simply excavates tunnels inside you until one day, without warning, everything implodes. Jung perceived suffering entirely differently. He believed pain was the soul's messenger, the unconscious mind's alarm system, the language that your whole self, what you are in totality, uses to capture your attention. He said, "Depression is like a lady in black. If she appears, don't dismiss her. Invite her inside, offer her tea, and listen to her message. But you don't listen. You silence, distract, stay busy, numb. You do everything possible to avoid examining what truly matters. What is this pain attempting to reveal? The truth? Suffering only hurts this much because you're still battling yourself. There's still one part wanting to expand and another part wanting everything to remain unchanged. Something inside you screams for transformation, but your ego, comfortable with control, tries strangling that calling. And in this friction, pain is born. Because transformation hurts. Evolution hurts. Releasing outdated beliefs, severing toxic connections, permitting what no longer serves you to die. All of this constitutes mourning, an internal process of death and rebirth. But precisely in this space of ruins, something new can emerge. Because when everything within you deconstructs, when certainties collapse, when pain exposes your vulnerability completely, you can finally perceive who you genuinely are, without protective layers, without performance, without masks. And at that precise moment, suffering becomes holy, because it brings you to your knees before the only force that can liberate you, yourself. Pain isn't the journey's end. It's the beginning of the path toward wholeness. Jung understood this deeply. He recognized that suffering isn't system failure, it's process. Pain isn't the road's conclusion, it's the journey's commencement toward individuation. The problem? Most people surrender before crossing that dark valley. They flee, they distract, they return to superficiality. But not you. If you've reached this point, you're ready to cross. And in our next section, we'll understand how this crossing unfolds, how the individuation path, regardless of how isolated and brutal it seems, is what ultimately sets you free. Let's continue. It's intensifying now. Few people possess the courage to begin the individuation journey, and even fewer have the courage to complete it. Because this path doesn't promise comfort, doesn't offer guarantees, doesn't protect your ego. It obliterates it. Jung described individuation as a process of becoming who you are, but this primarily means unlearning what you think you are. And that hurts more than any external rejection, because you begin realizing that much of what defined you until now was illusion. You aren't your accomplishments. You aren't your traumas. You aren't the image you constructed to be loved, respected, or admired. All of this was what you created to survive. But surviving isn't living. And individuation is life's invitation beyond mere survival. It's when the unconscious starts pushing everything repressed, hidden, and distorted toward the surface. Individuation requires the persona's dissolution, Jung wrote, for it's merely a mask of collective convenience. In other words, you'll need to peel away your own skin to discover what exists beneath. It's in this process that you begin becoming untouchable, not because nothing affects you anymore, but because you've already walked through fire. You've confronted your monsters. You've looked directly into the eyes of your shame, your neediness, your rage, and declared, I see you. And you no longer control me. It's this internal clarity, this lucidity facing your own darkness, that grants you strength independent of approval, recognition, or control. You no longer need universal love. You no longer need to win every dispute. You no longer need to appear strong, because you know who you are, and nobody can steal that knowledge from you. True emotional armor isn't a shell, it's a core. It's integrating all your parts into a consciousness center that remains steady during storms. You might experience pain, but it doesn't shatter you. You might be hurt, but you don't lose yourself. Because you've stopped being reactive and have become whole. You've stopped inhabiting the surface and have begun dwelling in the depths. However, this depth carries a price, solitude. Not because you'll be alone, but because few people can accompany you on this journey. Most remain trapped on the surface, in masks, in the terror of feeling. And when you begin liberating yourself, you inevitably create distance. But this distancing isn't rejection. It's maturation. You don't distance yourself from pride. You distance yourself because you no longer fit where you once hid. And this brings us to the final point of this journey, consciousness as shield. Because what protects you isn't strength, it's clarity. This is what we'll discuss in the last part. Consciousness as the only state where nothing, absolutely nothing, has more power over you. Let's finish this crossing together. We're almost there. Now that you've arrived here, something needs stating very clearly. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will shield you from external suffering if you remain unconscious of your internal world. The words will continue wounding. The rejections will continue stinging. The losses will keep knocking you down until you awaken. And awakening isn't magical. It's a daily decision. It's looking inward even when it hurts. It's taking complete responsibility for everything you feel without blaming others, the past, or fate anymore. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." You've spent your entire life resisting the fear of inadequacy, the emptiness of rejection, the pain of isolation, the anguish of feeling invisible. But what did you do with all that? You hid. You silenced yourself. You tried controlling everything. You tried being perfect. You tried being strong. And all of this has brought you here, exhausted, tired of fighting the world and yourself. But now you know. True emotional immunity isn't hardness, it's clarity. It's not about creating armor, it's about expanding awareness. Because when you understand your triggers, your patterns, your wounds, others' actions lose their power to destroy you. You still feel, but you don't drown. You still suffer, but you don't lose yourself. And that changes everything. What shields you isn't protecting yourself from life. It's diving into it deeply. Those who live on the surface get hurt by every wave. Those who dive know that silence, stability, and power exist below. And that's where you're headed. When you start living from that place of integration, presence, acceptance, the world may try knocking you down, but it no longer finds where to hit you. If this video touched you somehow, if something within you has awakened, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now. Your support means everything. And write in the comments below, "I choose awareness." Let's start a movement of people who no longer want to survive by pretending strength, but to live with truth. Don't forget, the next video is also part of this journey. It's essential. You need to keep going. Real transformation only begins when you don't stop at the first step. See you there.